and I am your host today at the Business as Unusual webinar for July. We're super excited to be talking about tech today, driving versus drowning, really understanding the smart tech platforms that are going to fuel your business growth. Just a couple of housekeeping items while we're getting started. Wanted to let you know that we will be live streaming on a number of social platforms. If you're not joining us viewing the Restream platform, Dana Welchers will be moderating our LinkedIn session. So if you've got any questions, she will be taking those questions and feeding them into myself and the other speakers today. So we're really excited about this topic. We're going to talk about how to decide what technology platforms are going to help you grow your business, talking a little bit about making some good tech choices and avoiding some bad ones. And then who do you need on your team? Who is going to be the right people to put within this process? And so we're going to get jumping in. You'll see a new face, one of our sponsors, Joseph Guerreri's joining us today. And he is from Insperity. He's a certified business performance advisor. And Joe really helps leaders to address their business growth goals and accelerate performance as a performance advisor for Insperity. Insperity is the original employer organization. They're a PEO, and Joe says he acts a little bit like a business therapist with a focus on what keeps small business and mid-sized business leaders up at night. People, process, and performance issues. So Insperity's scope encompasses the ABC2s of HR administration, benefits, and compliance, but the force multiplier is the C, that's culture. So welcome, Joe. Thank you for joining us and being my co-host today.
Pleasure.
And then I want to introduce our guests on the hot seat. Mike Remke is one of the co-founders of Bonsai. Mike has over 15 years experience in lean manufacturing and operations management in the aerospace and defense market. He's passionate about improving efficiency of business processes and eliminating waste. He has extensive experience using process failure modes and effective analysis. He's also an award-winning innovator and is a certified Six Sigma Green Belt. So thank you and welcome, Mike. And then Matt, his co-founder at Bonsai, is an ex-Googler of 12 years. So Matt served in the retail, consumer goods, restaurant, travel, and finance industries for over a decade, strategically planning billions in digital marketing investments. Matt drove multi-billion realized revenues for his clients. Whoa, that's a mouthful. Using analytics, statistical forecasting, auction modeling, cloud computing, and machine learning. So he was Google's exclusive digital analytics advisor for 40 plus Fortune 500 companies like Procter & Gamble, Coca-Cola, Unilever, Kohl's, and Best Buy. So we've got two really, really smart technologists on the call today, and as well as Joe. Joe, give me just a quick nugget about what's not on your bio. What should our audience know about you that's not in your bio?
Well, on the fun side of things, I am a semi-professional singer, and I do that when it's sometimes at work. But actually, a couple of us at work are in the same chorus, so that's kind of fun. But then the things at work, what I really enjoy is just helping business owners explore how they could be better. And 90% of the time, it's about the people. It's not about the process all the time. It's about the people that are there, and then the process and technology then enable those good people. So I have a lot of fun doing that.
Great. Thank you for sharing. And I have had the pleasure of hearing you sing, and you are fabulous. So
Thanks.
we were joking before we got on the call that we might have to have Joe break into a song if we get a little off track. So stay tuned. That could happen. Mike, what's not on your bio that people should know about?
Yeah, I guess you covered a lot of the work info. I guess outside of work, hobby-wise, I'm a avid kind of woodworker. Got 3 little kids also, so I'm quite busy outside of the office.
Yeah, that is busy. 3. So, and Matt, same question to you. What's not on the bio?
Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for having us, Joe and Kathy. I like Mike, so I have two little kids out here, and we live in Wheaton, and they keep me pretty busy. I failed at my first professional career in baseball about a lifetime ago. So if you ever want to hear someone tell the old stories of the glory days, I can be that guy. So really just excited to talk with you all today.
Well, thank you. I'm a huge baseball fan, so I guess we do share something in common. So we're going to jump in to one of my favorite topics. I think having a functional technology stack is certainly one of the most critical aspects of growth strategies. And I think it's, we're all hearing discussion around inflation and recession, and tech enablement is, in my view, one of the most important places to invest in when we are going into leaner recessionary times. So I think this is just such a timely opportunity to talk about this. So as we were prepping for this session, we discussed how, both of our organizations really work with companies that are investing in technology stacks, and some organizations are over investing. A lot of enterprise organizations have too many, are a very bloated tech stack. And then other organizations, maybe more mid-market or smaller organizations, tend to have not enough tech in their stack. So talk us through what the macro view of how many business platforms are pretty typical based on the different industries that you guys are working in.
Sure.
Yeah, I can start with this. So thanks for bringing up the slide. Great question, Kathy. So like you, we see the same thing. We see there's a lot of companies that frankly need to up level the technology they use, and then you kind of have the opposite problem. We actually do research in this specific area, just to give you some context, and you see some numbers on the screen. These are different vertical industries, and at Bonsai we track, I think it's something, correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, I think it's something like around 7,000 companies we currently survey essentially. And so with the numbers on the screen are sort of the average number of technologies that these companies have essentially in market just to solve business, customer, and marketing intelligence, right? From advertising all the way to data and technology on top of that. And so you see kind of two columns of numbers there. The column on the right is total tech, all in, and then the middle column, or sorry, the first number there, we call it third-party technology. But what we're really saying is those are the bits of technology that those companies buy and use on average, where the technology essentially is collecting data on the business's behalf, right? It's sometimes known, sometimes not known. But as you kind of look through these numbers, I think our takeaway, and I don't know if it's your takeaway, but we see these numbers and we know technology is important. We know you need a lot of tech, but at the same time, there's a lot of tech here, right? 20, 30, 40 platforms, depending on the space. And our question that we usually start with is why do you have so many? Or is this something that's actually adding value?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me throw you a softball. So since you have a baseball background, and let's just ask a broad question about putting it into the words of a business owner, or maybe chairman of the board or a board member, why they want to get more out of the business. So why should businesses invest in an optimal business technology stack?
Yeah, it's a great question. You have to reach customers a lot of ways, frankly, and technology is how we do that today, right? And so do you need to engage with new and prospective customers across many different points? And do you need many partners? Absolutely. So I think the idea that you need to have that addressed is fundamental nowadays. You can't scale a business in many respects without solving how you want to approach tech. So I think that's sort of the value, right? And then I guess I'll throw the question over to Mike too, and your perspective on that same one, because it's so good. But knowing you need to solve tech is different than saying that more tech solves everything.
Yeah. And kind of to your question, Joe, and kind of along the lines of the chart that we're showing up there is, the part of the effect, right, of having, so much tech at different companies that are shown in the list there, right, is it's not only that you're probably paying for them, maybe some of the third-party tags that are shown up there, maybe those are defunct also. One thing that we actually see quite a bit is, like for example, for a business, let's say you've been using a particular social platform for several years, right? And over time, your particular audience kind of like moves away from that platform for whatever it's not as effective anymore. So you shift your spend off that platform. But anything that you put on the site tech-wise to line up to that social platform, those tags are still firing likely, and the data is going somewhere, and it's also slowing down your site, right? So there's implications of keeping too much tech and not really like cleaning as we go. So it's really important to really be thoughtful about what you pick, because you certainly need to invest in technology, like Matt said, to really drive the business forward. But as that happens, you have to make sure we're sort of looking back at what was in place, and does any cleanup need to occur as you kind of continue down the line. Otherwise, things just keep getting bolted onto the side, and it just gets bigger and bigger. And oftentimes, folks aren't really even aware that it's that this is occurring, or potentially slowing down their site, or even sending data to places that they don't really approve of anymore. Which also has implications more recently with CCPA and GDPR, privacy and consent. So there's implications with that also. So it's a good kind of first place to look. And for us in doing this research, it's very kind of telling of how widespread the issue is, right? Because it's very unlikely that any company is going to need 45 third parties to really operate their site properly. So it's a good kind of barometer for us to see where everybody's at, and then we can kind of work from there with companies.
So there's a lot of things that an organization has to consider when they're selecting a technology or a platform, or determining how they can tie things together. And I'd like you to address those, but I'm going to predispose you to the first thing, and that is, we're not at the stage yet, like the Jetsons, where artificial intelligence can really run the business for you. It's still people using the technology, still people interacting with the interfaces, still people figuring out what good and bad data to put in there, and you're trying to stop people from put bad data in, for example. So let's talk about the people impact as one of the first things that you consider when an organization looks at it, because they could have all the best technology in the world and the most complicated interfaces, so they always get terrible data because the humans just can't keep up with it. So maybe start with that as one of the things they should consider, and how you all address it, and then name a couple of other things that are real key. And do we need to advance the slides, or is this a good one to talk on? We got this one, and we got another slide after that kind of addresses.
Oh, yeah, that's a great.
Yeah.
We'll get to that one too, Joe. But
so address the people. Address the people related. That, like, you could make the most detailed interface, but human can't keep up with it. There's that fine line. But then, what are some of the other things they should consider? So it's a broad question.
Great question. We'll get to like how we think about this in terms of like the steps to success. I think what I'll say off the front though is, from the very beginning, when we have been working with clients as their advisors to optimize what they get from technology and the systems on top of it, we've called that process teams first technology design. And so, like you said, that is where it starts and ends. And so, we see very rarely, once you've identified a certain criteria and category of tools you might be able to use, a lot of times, a lot of different things might work. It has the technical requirements you need. From there, it's, can people use it? Do they understand it, right? And how does it fit into the actual teams, right? And them getting value out of it is absolutely where it's going to be. So we ask in one of our, we do these interviews and surveys as part of sort of our discovery process at Bonsai. And so we ask teams specifically these things like, hey, do you have to use tools that you don't understand? And can you name them and like tell us more about like where that doesn't line up? We do that for a very specific purpose, right? Because to your point, Joe, we know that like sometimes fixing a tech stack is about getting a new tool, but frankly, sometimes it's about getting the right people informed about how to use it.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Around the training side of it and really communicating changes oftentimes, one place to start is really just making sure that teams that work alongside one another are truly communicating their needs, whether that's, a data need from this team to this team or some kind of output, but really starting, like Matt said, with, understanding the, needs of the individuals, and then how does, company operate within that right now, and then how can the tools assist them, to be more effective. Because like on the slide here, there is no, nothing is going to do, there's no magic bullet. It doesn't matter what your local friendly tech salesperson says, the next platform that you're pitched is not going to fix everything. Everything is a slow road. It should be, done very slowly, deliberately, have a good onboarding plan with how you're going to, integrate that tool with your team's help along the whole way. Nothing is just going to be bolted in and then solve all your problems, and it's just never going to happen. I think being very mindful of how it's going to fit into your system, whatever that is today, whether it's good or bad, is really important. And being able to manage the change with the tech and the team, throughout the entire process is really critical to putting anything in place that's going to be sustained and successful.
Yeah, many of us marketers really hate the word marketing automation. It just is not really indicative of how complicated it is to automate sales and enable sales. So definitely love this nothing does it all. So you guys have some thoughts around what to kind of look out for when you're considering, the tech stack. You call it your little BS detector. So talk us through that.
Thanks. Yeah, I think this was inspired by a conversation that Mike had at a recent industry conference, or I forget how we specifically landed on this list, but we've actually found it to be it's really simple and helpful, right? And so there's a couple of points to call out here. And it's also fair to say that there can be good services and tech that uses some of the things on this list, but it's just sort of like, we call it as like the things to like listen for, and then I would say use it as a cue to probe. So one is when if you are in a conversation being pitched or demoed a platform, and the only thing that they can tell you is that a lot of other people have bought it or it's growing at a certain amount, it's an indication like, okay, press more about that, right? So they might have bought for some reason. We're all in a webinar today about how to think about this to add true business value. We all know that like the whole world's not on this webinar. The whole world doesn't have time to have necessarily solved this, and technology can be used kind of as a stopgap, right? Or like a quick fix in a lot of cases. So just because your competitors have adopted a tool doesn't mean it's actually helping them. So just like be aware of that. Then, kind of dollars under management goes along with that. The kind of Mad Lib test at the end around, machine learning is not the only buzzword out there today, but I mean, we hear it and see it everywhere now. And so I think a real basic thing you can do, I remember doing this even recently, is if someone's telling you about how their technology or their platform leverages machine learning to solve a problem, ask them what specifically about machine learning is doing that. What models, like how is it working, right? You don't even need to necessarily understand the answers, by the way. It's just a good prompt to kind of see if is there something there, or is this more, kind of spin on top of something that, might not have the sizzle underneath. I don't know, Mike, your thoughts.
Yeah, and these kind of questions here, I think all really just focus on the point that, adding isn't necessarily better, right? Every company has an existing tech stack. It may not be optimized for what you have right now, but you're likely paying for it, and the team that you have is working within it. So oftentimes what we find, outside of, adding new tech or being pitched, like in this example here, is really just understanding what you have in front of you right now and how is that really, operating, and what can you do differently internally to make that successful. If kind of after you've gone through that process, you understand that you definitely have a gap, then certainly, right, then these things, you can understand exactly your need, get pitched, and then these things come into play. But yeah, one thing I think is even before we kind of get to this point is really just understanding the landscape of, what is at your company right now? Where's the data? Is it well understood? Is it all connected the way that it should be to be effective under all your teams? Right? Does everyone trust it? There's lots of kind of like basic questions to really start with. And once you have find a hole potentially in it, then something like this applies. But I do like the line about the replace machine learning with magic, because we found some sales material sometimes that unlike a leave behind that can replace magic, and it's pretty funny actually. But it's good things to probe though, for sure, because you really want to know. You can get pitched anything, but really when like the rubber hits the road and you're in the midst of implementing a new software, that's really when it matters to understand exactly how this is going to work and help integrate with your team. So really, I guess the takeaway from this is really, if you are being pitched, really challenge whatever is being presented to you, and ask really pointed, very, very specific questions about how it's going to fit into your particular business. Because if they're trying to sell you software, they should help you throughout that implementation process, not just give you a login and walk away. So really making sure that the onboard process is good is going to be critical to its success.
Well, I can see from the next slide, your baseball background is also showing itself. So you want to give us an idea of how you want to speak to that? And Kathy, you might have a question in there too.
Yeah, go. I'll let them take this one.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so fielding your tech team, I guess, and this goes with, there's some questions I saw in the chat around how you pick tools, and there's a little bit I think that relates to this. This idea of like, okay, great, we know what to look out for. We know that more tech isn't always the answer, but we know that we need multiple tools to see success. So like, how do we decide what to start with? Our big thing is here, like the analogy of a baseball team, I guess, on a simple level, right? Like you got 9 players on a baseball team, and they do different things, right? Like the pitcher throws the ball from the mound, the catcher catches it, the other fielders, do their work, playing their position. And in the same way, technology, each tool that you could conceivably take on has a specific purpose. Like, again, back to the other slide, like it isn't magic. There are actual, real, important technological things that these tools are providing, but they do a specific thing. And so knowing and understanding that they're like, because that's a real thing. Like some tools are great for reaching customers online. Some are great at collecting data. Some are great at visualizing data. Some are great at managing your customers, messages and orchestration. Like these all are different things. And so the first step is sort of just understanding that, right? And acknowledging that like you're about to possibly add a tool to your tool belt. It might be something that's perfect to help your business grow and succeed, but like, is that does it fit on the field, right? Or do you have like 10 players, right, who are already pitching, or do you already have like 4 shortstops, right? And so understanding that like just one more all-star to the list isn't necessarily going to make your team better. That's how you should think about like understanding first and foremost how to think about your tech as a unified group.
Yeah, and one thing to kind of add on to that is with the platforms that kind of continually come out, they'll advertise themselves as, probably several of the things that you see on the screen, and oftentimes they can play that role. So it's not a problem in the end, right? If, just in this example, we have nine players, right? But 6 could be the right fit for your business, as long as you have the proper sort of functions covered with the different platforms. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that at all. We just want to really be mindful that there isn't overlap, especially in something like a data warehouse, right? Where you don't want to have 3 data warehouses and, be paying for them. One is a problem, but then also, when you're trying to unify the data to move the needle for the business, if you have data in 3 different spots, that's, needs to be addressed, right? There should only be one of those, definitely. But there's other different sort of positions on the screen here that you can have a kind of a joined tool that sort of covers two things for the business, two or three things for the business. But you just need to really step back to evaluate those, and what function are they really playing, and getting the feedback of the practitioners in your business who really know how it's being used day to day is critical to really understanding that. You can't just take it for face value that, this software says it does this, so this is what we use it for. That likely is not the case when you really dig into the details. You may be using it for a lot more or a lot less than sort of what it's advertised for, and just understanding that before you make your next move is really important.
I can't help myself. I guess my baseball in me's got to say, I guess another extension of the analogy is, right, like if you take, in baseball, if you take your catcher and try to put him at pitcher, it's not going to work out too well. Or if you take your shortstop and put him in, first base, like, might not do the right thing. It's going to be the same thing with your technology, right? Just because someone says they can do it all, if you're taking like a tool that's really best fit as your business's CRM and then trying to run all your ads through it, might not be great. Or if your data warehouse is trying to do your visualization and that's not what it's really great at, same idea.
Yeah, I think that, I love this topic because when we talk about any type of investment in this direction, we're really thinking about the entire process. So we're thinking about like a revenue generation system, people, tools, technology, process, and then talent system in the same way. So you're really thinking about the overall system you're trying to build that is inclusive of technology and people. Is there a formula that you guys are using to kind of evaluate, or do you think about people first or the process first? How do you kind of, before you field your team, like how do you roadmap that system that you're trying to build?
Yeah. For our engagements, we normally start kind of exactly like you said. We'll draw a map, and that's a very very interactive process, with all the leaders and practitioners within a business to draw the boxes, connect the dots, and really understand what data is going from this platform to this one. Is this actually going out to the audiences that you want? Is it actually flowing into the data warehouse the way that you thought it is, right? And really walking through every single piece of tech that people are using today, whether they're actively used or not, is sort of irrelevant, right? If it's part of the current system, we map out the entire thing to really get a common language. I think it is really important with anyone that we're working with. You can always rattle off the names of companies that you're using, and until you really see, on a page exactly how they interact in day to day and how the data connects, until you see that, it's hard to understand really where the gaps are. So it's the first thing that we'll do to really just kind of set the scene for what to do next. And oftentimes, just from that map, you can really see some big gaps or duplication of effort over here, or places where you can connect a lot of data to make a big difference.
Plus one to that, and then I think the paired thing we do is when we look at our tools, like the expertise we try to bring at Bonsai, is we call it fitness for use in terms of how we evaluate, but be very like declarative and specific, like this tool can do this, right? So that when we're looking at that map, if we hear from a team, hey, well, I'm trying to get my marketing ROI from this data point, and we're like, okay, well, like that data cannot give you that, right? There's a gap, right? And so sometimes it's solved with a tech or a different integration, but those like understanding what each data set essentially from each tool, like what it can and can't do, it's huge for us, because then it helps us not just from the perspective of showing how they, like Mike said, when we map it, you can see big gaps, but when we see there's a problem where someone's trying to use data to do something it can't do, there's a huge, that we see a lot of opportunities there to say, like, there's an easy place, right? Help the lives of the teams using it, help the organization, right? Get better answers. And a lot of times it happens with, pretty simple steps, right? Either, lift and replace or just reconnect in a different way.
Right. Well, I'm going to circle back to a question as we're kind of talking about building your tech team. We got a question from the audience around how do you handle the fact that people have preference, like a preference around using certain technologies when you're thinking about just picking the right technology? Like how do you handle that influencer that wants their favorite tech to be utilized?
I have two thoughts, Mike. Love yours too. So we're really proud to be agnostic, and what we mean by that is, again, I don't think it's not that common where we're working with an organization and here's this challenge the marketing or business intelligence or other team has, and we take a look at it and say, hey, you know, guys, this tool just doesn't work. They need to buy something completely different. I mean, it happens, but it's far less frequent than you think. And so those preferences really matter when we evaluate, right? Because there's a lot of like shared organizational history there. Like people like are going to be better at using tools that they prefer and understand and can activate. And like we're huge on that. And so for the most part, we try to lean into that. There are times when the tool that people prefer to use doesn't have the answer that they thought. And then those are the challenging conversations. So but we try to have those conversations very specifically to say it's not about taking this tool away. It's helping you utilize what you can and can't get out of it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
Yeah, makes total sense.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. Just to that, the data, you know, there's certainly personal preferences, right, around using tools, but if it's the choice between, you know, A or B, and, you know, within your organization, you kind of have some that prefer A and some B, then, you know, the next common denominator is what data is it providing, you know, what answers is it providing? And then is it really just a you know, training and sort of like comfort in becoming familiar with the other tool, right? Because once the barrier sort of is removed on why this other tool is actually the better one to use, and that's really understood by the team, I think the preference, you know, the priority of preference will kind of move down, right? When they see the value, right, of using this tool over this one, even if they're more comfortable, that's something that over time, right, they can be trained on. And when they see the value in using it, which become very easy or easier to move to.
Another interesting dynamic that we say is it's funny, teams won't even know this until we go through this process with them, but a lot of times the tools that the people on the teams like to use are the right ones, and then the ones they don't like to use are the wrong ones, and they don't even know, like it's rooted in the fact that it's not helping them. And so a lot of times just simplifying this, you realize people end up working with the things that they like the whole time. Like, oh, this is great. I only need to work with this tool now. I don't have to work with these other ones. But like this process helps illuminate it. Because again, like going back sometimes in an organization a few years, you know, what's their perception of things? Well, they thought these 5 things magically answered everything. So of course they would need to understand them. And they think that the problem is like their fault or their team's inability to use it. When really the fault is just they didn't need to be doing it at all in the first place.
Yeah, and I do think that adoption, implementation are just like mission critical pieces of the puzzle. And I know, like, when is it right to start to look for an alternate solution? Is, you know, does that sort of factor? This just came up yesterday for us, so where we're, you know, we've got a tool, it's working for the client, but it doesn't do everything we'd like it to do in this next phase of what we need. So now we're talking about creating some workarounds so we could stay in a tool. Like how do you address those types of questions and challenges?
And the workaround is kind of tricky because if there's, you know, value being provided by the current tool, you can do the calculus to say, you know, if I add this tool and get this feature, this is the business impact. And if that isn't, you know, too great, sticking with the current tool that you have, you know, is fine. But then once you start adding in workarounds, one of the terms that we use a lot is using data factories, right? Which is the thought of sort of basically manual manipulation of data on a day-to-day basis to sort of, you know, assist you through your day, right? You get this report every morning, but then you go in and you run your macro and then you color these fields and you change that cell every day and then that's your number. Right, that extra work that you do, you know, on the side of what comes out of a platform is a risk, right? It's a risk to your business. It takes up a bunch of time, and when you kind of build on those sort of workarounds over time, and then your business relies on those, it's something that isn't as stable, really. So it can have some errors in it, and plus it takes up more and more time. So something to just be mindful of in making that decision of do we stay or do we move to this tool is, how many workarounds do you need to make to sort of fill that function of the other platform, and taking that risk into account, before you would do the transition. And then if you are going to make the transition, I think it's just really important to communicate what is changing and why with the entire team, and bring them along throughout the entire process. You never want to have a tech change communicated via email or, hey, here's your new login for your system, right? That is not going to work for anybody or the business. So making sure that all the key stakeholders, practitioners that are involved with the particular tool are there from the beginning, because they'll be able to root out a lot of the problems of the transition too.
Well, guys, let's talk about the people part of it again. I can't help it, but I've got to go back to that, and you won't be able to help it by using a roster terminology and sticking with that baseball diamond. So tell us what the things to consider as you're building the roster, and let's go on to the next slide. All right, so go ahead and
sure.
So the people needs. Go ahead.
So I guess for just quickly, the graphic in the middle I did not make. Thank you, Instagram, for this. I love this graphic. I found this a long time ago. But I guess around the decision, for tech, one thing I think that comes up very often is sort of human nature, especially if you're involved with a business, for a long time, right? You've worked somewhere for a while, you know how it works. Assumptions can be made around, how the business should work. And that's something that to be very mindful of when, you're kind of moving forward with any strategy or with a technology selection, is that you're really trying to get to the wisdom piece and not the sort of conspiracy piece, which is really taking whatever information you have currently in the business, and then when you apply your own sort of gut and maybe some theory to it, you get more in the conspiracy camp. But really wanting to move from the data, information, knowledge, insight to the wisdom piece, and not going past that. So any of the decisions that are going to be made need to drive business results using data with the help of people informing that. But they really need to work together. It's a really important piece to this.
And then we have like the build versus buy kind of call out here, and in terms of roster decisions, agency versus in-house. I think there's a lot of aspects of the value, the sales and marketing and outcomes value that can be handled by a company's team internally, or they can be outsourced to partners. I think you can think about tech the same way, like building and buying, right? Sometimes it might make sense to have your own custom tool for customer relationship management. Sometimes you just go buy, HubSpot or Salesforce, right? Like these are the sort of questions that I think every business, as they're tackling this, is probably thinking about in terms of, what to do. I think, I guess I'll share like a quick story from like a engagement we're in a few weeks ago, where we kind of helped a client of ours answer this question. It's a fairly decent sized retailer, and I think like the analysis showed for them that it's I think the same thing we're going to see it for a lot of companies, is they're deciding which to do. In the short term, some of the things that they might want to do could be cost them a little bit more money up front, but they get a lot further faster, by outsourcing. So there's certain things that they don't have in-house. So certain agencies or partners that they could bring in quickly, and they could get a ton of expertise across a lot of things they need, pair them with the right tools, and get their, kind of like what's the fastest path to growth, right? And then, but the same analysis, the exact same analysis showed it's pretty clear that if they decided to invest, if they wanted to think about solving this over the course of years and not months, there's no question they could make more money in housing. It would be more expensive, it would take them longer. But when you look at the 3-year model, or you look at like kind of where this could net to, there's just a big difference in value. And so for them, it's more of like, there isn't a wrong answer, right? That's the key thing. It's understanding that these are your decisions, right? And then it's going to be up to the leaders, the boardroom, the C-level, whomever, right, to decide what's the priority right now. And you can only influence that so much from our position or from a technologist position. But I would say like those are the decisions, right? If you understand that you're building for the long game and you can invest in that regard, there's a lot of things that you can build in-house and buy, put internally that's going to be lasting value. Not everyone can do that all the time, and you need to move quicker. Sometimes buying a tool is better. Sometimes leveraging a partner or an agency will help you get out the door. These are just the realities of every situation. Every timeline is different. Every economic situation is different, but we see these things all the time, and that this continues to play out in this way.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think we see this similar situations where where are people going to be placing their investment bets, and there's just so many factors, especially with even the access to talent. So to build in-house and wait and do that kind of slow build is sometimes super challenging. I also feel like I'm seeing less investment in custom technology than I did maybe even 7-8 years ago, where people are not investing in building their own tech because there's so many choices out of the box. So how do we, choose something out of the box? Might not be perfect, but with a good adoption plan, we're making it really work well for our business. We're getting some great questions from the audience, but I do want to kind of circle back to making sure we talk through sort of how do we get started? For us, when we're thinking about helping a client build their technology roadmap, we're starting with a gap analysis. But can you guys take us through the process that you use for helping a company get started? And then I'd love to follow up with some of our great questions that we're getting from our guests.
Definitely. I think we've got a quick kind of headline slide on the next one to kind of talk about this at a high level. These are 5 steps. I think from our perspective, we really do think it kind of can be really well understood by just focusing on these kind of 5 simple things to start. Evaluating what you have under the hood already is huge. We see this step skip so much. We never, I'm sure our clients find this a little annoying at first. We ask so many questions about what's already there. It's so critical because it helps guide the rest of it. Second, you'll see, Joe, you'll be happy to see that Teams is right near the top, right? If you trust me, we'd start there if you didn't have to also figure out the tech that you have under contract. And what's so funny, and you guys probably can relate, is I can't think of a single enterprise we've worked with where the company itself knew exactly what they owned. There's always something they weren't aware that they're paying for. We stopped using that 5 years ago, right? Oh, interesting, right? So that's one. It's almost like a kind of like 1 and 1A. But then fitness for use, we talked a little bit about what does this thing actually do? How could it be used? How are you using it? Does that align? Then going back to the lineup idea, if we think about this from where should things orchestrate and integrate? Are you there yet, or do you got gaps? And then finally, great, we have a new plan, or we have a path forward. We got to simplify, we got to socialize, we got to change manage, right? Then it's going to be putting in the work to making it happen. I guess those are the steps.
Yeah, do you want to talk us through a little bit more detail?
Oh yeah, for sure. Do we want to, I think we might have a couple examples of each one of these. Do we want to start with
I'd love that.
Yeah, so I guess Mike, you can chime in on this one too. I mean, this is basically some logos with some common technology at the top, and then at the bottom there's some common actual types of technology in the marketing and business intelligence space. So see, it's a pretty simple diagram, right? But one is what do we own, and what is it? That's a huge thing. Is this an ad platform, or is this my CDP, or is this doing data warehousing? What is this?
Yeah, and thinking through, exactly right, and thinking through something we mentioned before about as part of the interviewing and sort of discovery process with the teams. Oftentimes, there might only be one person at your company who actually knows that answer, and they may or may not be the owner of that platform, right? So really, it's really important, especially in larger organizations, to really talk with everybody that's involved with these to kind of understand the nuances of how this works with this, and we actually use this for these 2 functions. And until you understand that in your kind of current state, it's sort of difficult to move forward, or you're moving forward and might not have the full picture. another thing that, as you were just talking on the previous slide, Matt, I was thinking of ownership too. One thing that we find that oftentimes isn't clear is, who is the owner of this data at the company? Who's the person to go to, for even access, right? Or who understands, the entire relationship with that particular provider. Things like that are often not well understood, especially if the tech was brought in a while ago. People might have permissions to use it day in and day out, but truly, who's the admin of all these things? And can you contact them right away if you need to get access or make a change or find something wrong? So setting a kind of a racy chart, if you will, right, for like roles and responsibilities for each of these platforms is also really important to understand who to go to. Something we see as a gap.
This might be a good time to ask the question from the audience around where do people go to help train people on a particular technology platform?
That's a great question. Yeah, I mean, it definitely gets into the second part of like this process around teams. I think, the answer is going to be dependent on where the team's at today and what you want them to do with this technology, right? So, you've got practitioner level understanding, which is deep and required for like, if, hey, the lifeblood of the companies required this person to use it. There's one level of training. There's another level of training that might be, hey, I don't need to know how to do everything here, but I need to understand what it's telling me, right? So this is probably not, again, unique, even at Bonsai internally, right? We use different scaled resources depending on the training needs. So sometimes like we've got Coursera, Udemy, there's other, like, let's just call them, like, if you want to get an understanding of something at a broad level, those can be great places. But yeah, like sometimes there's going to be a need for, a firm to come in, either the partners who work at the tech platform themselves sometimes have specialists, or you can work with vendors to kind of do hands-on in-person training. I think once leadership understands what exactly they want to get out of their team and how deep they need to go, it's clear. And I think if you invest in that, you consider that part of the cost of onboarding and bringing something on, you're going to be very happy, because then you're going to get a lot of that upfront value. The survey your teams thing here too is sort of the paired thing with that, which is not just, we do ask around how people's comfortability and what they prefer. Another question that we feel like we're asking all the time that we don't hear asked enough is in our surveys. We'll just say, do you trust the data you use to make your last decision? And then like that question across lots of parts of a company. And like, this is a, kind of a little bleak, funny example, but like, this is sometimes the answers we get back, right? And so in the cases where it's like, I don't trust the data, that can be a training thing. Sometimes it can be underlying issues though, right? And so we think that it's another important component to understand where to start.
Yeah, absolutely agree. I think, a lot of people are afraid that they just don't even have the data, so that, it's like that's a barrier to getting started. What about the fitness for use piece?
Yeah, great question. So we, Mike can share more, I think, in terms of how this like plays out on individual platforms. I think just when I speaking at this at a high level, we think about this in kind of three buckets of the kind of questions, right? So you have all these tech platforms under hood, and so it's really important to know, and this is where I guess where like kind of specialized expertise can be a big help for a business, is what is that data that tool is actually collecting or generating, right? And so that can be advertising data, that can be collecting third-party, data on your customers, that can be business and sales or communications or, event data or all kinds of things. But like, being very specific, like, what is it? And then is that data useful for what you're doing, using it for, right? Or, does it help you reach prospective customers? Can it help you track behavior? Can it help you measure sales? What does it do? And then really it's ultimately just saying, like, does that function meet, does that data requirement fit into, like, well, that could help that function? And then, if you can check both of those boxes, it's the who needs to use it piece, right? If my marketer, trained on the marketing data, that's going to help grow customers. Are my operators, able to access outcomes data and business intelligence, right? And so if there's a gap at any one of these points, right, or a mismatch at any one of these points, there's a fitness for use problem. And it's not just a tech problem. It's a teams question, it's a tech question, and it's also a utilization question.
Yeah, and I don't know if this fits in here exactly, but this question was asked really early on and from our audience. What about data record design, portability, master data?
So I guess broadly about the master data, kind of related to the slide that's here. Thing I was going to add to Matt's comment is, when you think about the KPIs that are driving a business, there's some assumptions that go into those KPIs, right? When you look at a top level number, you have faith, right, that all the data that went into giving you that number every day is correct, right? And if you work backwards from the core KPIs that your business needs, and you work backwards all the way kind of to the left column of this chart, do you really have the fundamental underlying data that supports those KPIs? And is that your source of truth? And what does that master data look like? And where is it held? Is it all in one data warehouse? Is being split up? So I think kind of related to the question of like the design itself, want to make sure that aligns with the ultimate goal of what are you going to use the data for. So if you don't really need it, you shouldn't worry about tracking it or even have a platform to track it for. But that I think connects some of the dots of one thing that we often will see, and there's some assumption built in that that the KPI that you look at every day might not actually have all of the data that you think it does in it, or the reliable data that supports it. And that's something to work backwards towards to really understand what's holding that KPI up.
So that really sounds like it leads right into filling out your lineup. You've already talked about the people impact. Now we're really talking about which technology and what data are you ending up collecting now that you've kind of done that internal evaluation, and then figuring out how do you simplify it and then make it useful. So do you want to address that for us? I think we can advance to the next slide too.
Sure.
Yeah, definitely. So if you think about these first three steps, right, what do you have? What do people trust? Is it being used for the right thing? Like Mike mentioned, in real life, that comes out in a map and some insights and analytics. But in the analogy, it comes out kind of like this, right? You're going to see, hey, maybe I've got warehousing covered, advertising covered, I've got a customer, data platform covered, but I don't understand, measurement very well and attribution, or I don't understand business intelligence, or people don't have the right numbers in front of their teams at the right times, right? So there's like, boom, two things that I can address that can make a big difference for the whole system. And then you see like on the example of the benched technologies. It's no disrespect to these, by the way, this is just totally arbitrary. But again, the idea of like you might end up like saying, hey, well, we don't need, right? We haven't used, the business doesn't leverage Pinterest anymore, or the business doesn't leverage this tool anymore. Like, let's make the team's lives easier. Let's get this off their plate.
Yep. And then you also want to then align what's left and figure out which technology is really going to be predominantly responsible for each critical function. So maybe the next slide will help illustrate that for us.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah. As part of that, as we just discussed, right, trying to simplify the stack overall. More tech is not better, I think is kind of the thing we've covered today. But whatever you end up landing on, making sure that the roles and responsibilities for all of the key stakeholders is very clear. Making sure that they have access to it, and really a continued communication with that data. Whether that's sort of the join meeting weekly between teams to make sure that you're just keeping up with things, so that the silos don't form. Right, that's something that's not going to help any organization. So depending on the relationship of certain teams to platforms, if you do have two teams that work within one, they should talk on a very regular basis. not only throughout a transition of tech, but then on an ongoing basis to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that how the data is being used is most effective, and you're not creating data factories or sort of barriers for the person that sits next to you.
Yeah. If you notice, like in the same vein, we would say, more tech isn't always the answer. Like the answer isn't take all your teams and train them on every single thing, right? It's how does that align? The marketing tools for the marketers, the sales and customer tools for the sales and customer teams, right? And enterprise data for this, that set. And then with the correct, right, alignment and orchestration, teams can help each other achieve the kind of shared objective, which is the whole point of this, right? Is to make your business run better.
Yeah, well, we could talk about this forever. I mean, I'm so passionate about technology and how it really enables growth. And the only thing I would add to this list of simplify and socialize is just like really keeping those business outcomes at top of mind so that you make sure that you're using your technology to inform the right decision making at that, at that senior leadership level. But this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you guys both joining us today. Sort of move to the next slide and let people know how to reach out to you. Matt and Mike can be reached through either their email or LinkedIn profiles. If you've got a question or a follow-up question that you want to ask, please ping them and put business as unusual in the subject line so they know that this is coming from our webinar today. I don't know if there's any further questions from our channels, but it was some great stuff. This is a big, deep topic. There's just so much technology to choose from, especially in the MarTech solution sets today. So it's super interesting to kind of dig in and hear how to really use a methodology to sort of think about how to build your technology roadmap. So just a note to thanking our sponsors. So Joe, representing Insperity today, we really appreciate you guys supporting us. We've got M3 Learning and HR Source as well as our sponsors. So thank you again for joining us as my co-host, Joe. We didn't get to one of your songs, but we'll have to do that next time you're on. We'll with that. And then I want to make sure everybody knows about what's coming next. Another really critical business opportunity is just to how to build better client experiences as we, as I mentioned early on, as we move into more recessionary conversations. I think retaining your customers, your current customers, is going to become mission critical for all types of businesses. So, what are some things that you can do in your organization to ensure that you're building those strong relationships with your existing client base? Chris is a good friend. He leads a sizable accounting firm. So he's got some interesting experiences, and he's going to really walk us through a case study of how they did this in their organization, and have his accounting team really working as relationship builders for retaining their customers. So it's gonna have some really incredible takeaways. And then lastly, I just want to thank everyone for joining us today. Matt, Mike, thank you so much for sharing your subject matter expertise. Again, Joe, thank you. And if you have joined us for the first time, I'm Kathy Steele from Red Caffeine, and we're a growth consultancy, and it's our mission to build organizations that clients want to work with and employees want to work for. So you can be badass to the bone, just like us. So thank you everyone for joining us today.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Kathy. This was wonderful.
Thanks a lot.
All right, signing off.